Hello everyone and welcome back to the Therapy by Craft YouTube channel. My name is Eunice. I am the maker behind Therapy by Craft, which is my little corner of the internet where I like to talk yarny things, mostly knitting, mostly socks. But today I have a very special episode where I want to share about my most recent finished project. It is a blanket, and instead of talking to you guys about it at length in a podcast, I thought that this blanket deserved an episode on its own. So before we get started, you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Therapy by Craft, or you can just subscribe to my YouTube channel below to keep up with my yarny adventures. So let's go ahead and get started. I am so excited to share with you that I finished a project that I started last January. It was my New Year's cast on in 2024. And I am talking about none other than my DK Weight Coziest Memories blanket. Okay, I'm going to show it to you. Ready? Ta-da! Yay! She's done! I'll show it this way too. Here she is in all her glory. I'll give you a little bit of a close-up. Ta-da! I'm so excited about this blanket, and I'm so excited she's done. Oh, now, let me give you all the details. So, the first thing to mention is the actual pattern itself. I always get the names mixed up because I feel like there's a Cozy Memories blanket, there's a Coziest Memory blanket, Coziest Memories, I don't know. But this one, and there's so many like mitered square knitting blanket patterns out there. But the one that I used for this is the Coziest Memory blanket by Kemper Ray. And it is a free pattern on Ravelry. I actually made the DK weight version, and I started mine being very heavily inspired by Kayla Litton from the Crazy Sock Lady. So the pattern itself, so Kemper Ray's pattern is a mitered square blanket that just kind of starts from like the bottom or the side, and it kind of builds on top, the blocks kind of build on top of each other. But the way that Kay Litton did it is that she had a center 4, and then the blankets sort of like radiated out from the middle. So I liked Kayla's version, and so that's what I did. Now, I don't think I will do it that way again, and I'll share more about that in a second, but that's what I did. So those are kind of the modifications that I made. I also made a modification where I slit the last stitch every row, and I basically made like a selvage edge so that on the wrong side, when it comes time to pick up the stitches, it's a lot easier to see where you're picking it up. It is a mitered square garter stitch blanket. The pattern is for a fingering weight version, but I did mine in DK, meaning that I held fingering weight double with itself. And I used a US 4 or a US 6 or 4 millimeter needle for this blanket. What I did is, I have it right here. I had double points that I put needle stoppers on at the end so that I could use them as straight needles, and it worked great for me. Let's see, what else to say about this blanket? So for each square, I did 20 stitches by 20 stitches, and the decrease that I did was, I think I just followed the pattern. Instead of having a single, I cast on an even number of stitches, so 20 by 20, so 40 stitches total. And sometimes what people will do is have an odd number of stitches and do like a center decrease in the middle so that you get a more prominent line, but I didn't do that. I just did an even number of stitches and did a knit two together and then slip knit, like to kind of decrease the center of the mitered square. Each square took about 9 grams of yarn. So it was perfect for my row 1 minis. It was also perfect for any scraps that I had left over after knitting a pair of socks. Most of these, I would say, are yarns that I used in other projects, but not all. Some of them are just minis that I thought were really cute, that I had from like my row 1 subscription, and I wanted to add it to the blanket. Some are actually yarns that I wanted to use really badly, but I didn't want to start a whole project with the yarn. I just really wanted to use the yarn, see how it knit up, but I didn't want to commit to like a sock or something like that. So I just put a square in the blanket, and that was enough to like satisfy my appetite to use that yarn. What else? I think the blanket itself is 12 squares by 14 squares. And I used all superwash yarns, superwash merino yarns. There's some squares in here that are like 80-20 blends. There's some in here that's 75-25. There's some that's 2-ply. There's some that's 4. I will say that the squares that have the 2-ply yarn, the 80-20 base, it did feel a little bit bulkier. It's this right here. All this is my, right here. These are from, I think it was Fiber Moon something, but that was a 80-20 blend, and it does feel a little bit thicker, and it did take up closer to 9 to 10 grams of yarn instead of like the 8 to 9 for the 4-ply. I think I was able to get away with doing that because it was DK weight. If it was a fingering weight Cozy Memories blanket that you were doing though, I would not recommend it because there's definitely a difference there in texture. Let's see. So like I said, I initially loved the idea of having middle squares that kind of like radiated outwards because I just thought it was really pretty. But as I was working on it, I realized that the more out you get from the center, the more squares you need to make to finish that perimeter. So by the end, like if I wanted to make, so I was doing it like a rectangle at a time. So I started off as a square and then I grew it by, I added to the perimeter, then I added to the perimeter again. Then after a certain point, I think I made it into a ratio that I liked. And then I kept that ratio to grow it even more. Now, by the end, I was getting really tired of adding squares to it because I realized that if I wanted an even blanket where each side of the blanket was even, it wasn't skewed, then I would have to add so many squares. So what is that? At the very end, like the perimeter ended up being, if I just wanted to make it a little bit bigger, it was like 50 squares or something like that, like 40 something squares just to make it a little bit bigger. I didn't love that. I felt like that was way more of a commitment than I wanted to make. So the next time I make this blanket, and I will make it again, I will definitely be starting from the corner and like going out this way instead of starting from the middle and going out this way. That way I don't have to like add to every single side of the blanket. I can just add to 2 sides of the blanket to grow the blanket to a size that I want. Now, let's see. What else do I want to say about this? In total, the blanket took 1,325 grams of yarn. 41 of those grams was used for the border. I wanted to use a color that was going to pop out, that was almost going to look like the blanket was being highlighted in like a bright frame. This is the color that I ended up using for the border. It's getting blown out just a little bit, but it's called Squeeze the Day. And I think this is a summer colorway, maybe May colorway from Hypnotic Yarns, their Yarnable subscription. it has this bright, beautiful yellow with pops of lime in there, and I just thought it was going to be perfect. Some folks, I think, or I went in the direction of like, oh, maybe I want to use a neutral color to kind of calm the eyes down from the chaos that is all of this, all these scraps. But I'm really glad that I went with the neon instead. I love it. I love the way that it kind of highlights the blanket. Yes, there are bright colors in the blanket, but none as bright as the border. And I just, oh my gosh, it was so much fun working the border also, because I got to see how this very, very bright neon color coordinates with each of the squares as I went around the side. And I loved doing that. Like, I think I finished the border in less than 48 hours. And it wasn't even like I was knitting on it constantly. I just picked it up whenever I could. And it didn't take me that long at all. I was addicted to seeing how the color played and interacted with the different colors on the border, like the different squares. Yeah, so I love that so much. Okay, modifications that I've made. Like I told you, you can find me on Ravelry, and I have some notes on my Ravelry page for this project that tells you more specifically and written out the modifications that I made for this blanket. For starters, like I said, I made this with a DK weight. I made this as a DK weight. And so I did 20 by 20 stitches, and I basically knit all the stitches and then slipped the last stitch with the yarn in front and turned the work, and then just knit all the way until I got to the last stitch, or I worked the pattern until I got to the last stitch, and then I slipped the last stitch with yarn in front to create like a selvage edge. It made picking up stitches a lot easier. The other modification that I made was for the border. When I went around to do the I-cord border, I did a different kind of I-cord than I think the pattern calls for. So Kayla also has a tutorial for how she did the I-cord border for her Coziest memory blanket. And it was good to have a visual of how she did it, but it included like a yarn over and then kind of passing the previous stitches over in order to join it to the blanket. And I really didn't like that. Like, I don't like doing yarn overs and passing the stitches over. So the way that I did it is I did a provisional cast on using a crochet provisional cast on to have like live stitches at the very start of my I-cord border. Then I did a 3-stitch I-cord border. What that means is that I used the crochet chain to pick up 3 stitches, and then the final stitch is the one that I picked up from the blanket itself. So basically I had 3 stitches on my double pointed needle, and then I picked up the last stitch. Then the way that I did my I-cord is I knit 2, and then I knit the final 2 stitches together through the back loop. Then I picked up a new stitch, the next stitch on the blanket. So again, what I did was I did a 3-stitch I-cord border where I had 3 stitches, and then the 4th one is the one that I picked up. The pattern that I used was to knit 2 and then knit 2 together through the back loop and then pick up a stitch. Slide the stitches to the right of the needle, knit 2 through the back loop, pick up a stitch. And that was so much easier for me to do. What that did though is it made the very first stitch of the I-cord just a tad thicker. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but that first stitch right here, oh gosh, you're not going to be able to see it very well, but this very first stitch here actually ends up being a little bit thicker because you're knitting 2 stitches together, but I don't really care. I don't really mind that at all. I just like the rhythm of that and the process of knitting that so much better than doing that yarn over and then like passing the loop through and blah, blah, blah. I just knit 2 together through the back loop, and that was perfectly fine. I also opted to do a 3-stitch I-cord border instead of a 4-stitch I-cord border because I really wanted the border to just be a hint of color. I didn't want it to be like its own thing to take away from the various colors of the blanket. Yeah. So another thing to note is that this blanket grew a lot after blocking, like a lot. So I took measurements before I blocked the blanket. I knew it was gonna grow. I mean, it's a garter stitch pattern, so it's very squishy. The fabric is so like, I wish you could reach through and like squish this blanket. And if you've done anything with garter stitch before, you know what I'm talking about. But it's that, it's all of that. And so it has a bit of like the garter stitch has a bit of an accordion type stretch. And so with the superwash yarn especially, I knew that it was going to grow. Like I had no doubt that it was going to grow. And I already knew that it was going to grow because I don't know if you can tell, but the middle 4 squares are so much bigger than the most recent squares that I added. Like, do you see the difference here? Like, wow. Do you see how much that grew? So this bright pink is one of the last squares that I added. And then this color here is like one of the first colors that I added. And it was using the same needle size and everything. But I think it's because the weight of like the weight that was being put on the middle 4 squares, like every time I was working on the blanket, like that's where there was the most, I guess, tension or pull. So, or stress. There was the most stress on that part of the fabric. And so it absolutely grew. And I think it's hilarious because the fresher, the newer squares on the blanket, you know, the squares are smaller. And I don't think that my tension tightened that much, honestly. But anyway, so back to the size. I did 14 squares by 12 squares. And unblocked, it was 42.5 inches by 53 inches. So 42.5 inches by 53 inches. That was the total of the blanket unblocked. After I blocked it, and the way I blocked it, by the way, is I soaked it in lukewarm water with wool wash. Then I actually spun it in my washing machine to get as much water out of my blanket as possible. And then I laid it flat on my bed for an entirety of the day, like in the sun, so that it could dry. And after blocking, the 42.5 by 53 inches stretched to 47 inches by 60.5 inches. That like, yeah, let me read that again. After I blocked it, it turned into 47 inches by 60.5 inches. That's a lot. Oh, wool in my mouth. Anyway, that means that it grew in each direction by like 5 inches almost. And what is that? That has to be maybe 12 centimeters. Yeah, it grew by like 12 centimeters on each side. So that was kind of crazy, but I loved that. I am not mad about it at all. I mean, who doesn't love a very large, cozy blanket, right? So yeah, I am very happy with the size. I wanted it to be even bigger initially, but after a while, like I said, if I wanted to make this blanket even a little bit bigger, then that means I would have to add a square on every single, like all 4 sides of this blanket. And I didn't want to do that. I was ready to start a new one. So I just didn't want to. I wanted to close and round out this blanket. And I'm so glad that I did. I'm very, very happy with the result. I would definitely recommend it to anybody who is interested in making this blanket. I think my recommendation for you would be actually to start at a corner. If you like the looks of it radiating outwards, I mean, go for it. You can, but be warned, you're going to have to be adding a lot of squares if you want to add, you know, width and height to the blanket towards the end, like as it gets bigger and bigger. I think the DK weight was a great first time experience with this blanket. I think if I had done it fingering weight as the pattern called for, it would have felt daunting. Like I would not have been able to keep up with it because it would have grown so slowly. So I would recommend starting with a DK weight. I also think that if you do a DK weight, one thing to be aware of is using any kind of patterned or self-striping yarns. So I knit a lot of socks, and so some of my leftover yarns were self-striping sock yarns. I wanted to add it to the blanket, but I realized it was going to be a little hard to do that. I held most of the yarns for this blanket with itself. So I used the tail from the outside of the cake of the yarn and then the inside of the cake of the yarn. And for most of these, it was fine. Like this color, if it was speckled or if it was a solid color, like it was not a big deal. But if it was self-patterning yarn or a self-striping yarn, I ended up with a bit of difficulty. It ended up marling, right? And the pattern was definitely lost. Like this one is a good example. It wasn't awful, this one, but you can definitely see where it kind of marled and muddied the colors. Now, every so often I got lucky, and if I had 2 balls of the self-striping yarn wound up into a cake and it happened to be a little bit even, then I was able to hold the colors together in such a way that I was able to get some stripes together. This is actually from my Freckled Whimsy Christmas Advent yarn, and that one was like a 24 color repeat, and obviously I wasn't able to get all 24 in here. I only got, how many is that, 4 colors. This one was another colorway that this one is from Tia's Terrific Threads, and this one, as you can see, I wasn't able to hold the yarns together, so kind of muddied that color up a bit. Another thing that you could do is to hold a neutral color with the self-striping yarn so that you can kind of see the color, but it's still going to be a little bit muddied. That's what I did with this here. Oh gosh, is this going to show? With this color here, this rainbowy color, I held a I held like a neutral color with the self-striping color, and I was able to get a little bit of the rainbow to shine through, but again, because it's with the neutral, it isn't as like vibrant. And then let's see here. Most of them though, if I used a self-striping yarn, it just ended up being kind of marled with itself. So that's something to note if you end up doing a DK weight and you have a lot of sock yarn, self-striping, self-patterning sock yarn laying around that you're hoping to use. Let's see, what else? I think that might be it. Have you made a Coziest memory blanket before? Have you done any other kind of mitered square blanket? I do plan to make another one. I definitely enjoyed this pattern very, very much. There's so many out there. I am going to be making another one. This time I'm going to be doing a fingering weight version. It's certainly not going to be as big as this, but I do want to have like a smaller lap blanket. And now that I've made this before, I feel like it's going to be a lot easier. My rhythm is going to be a lot quicker. And even if it is slow growing, I feel like the process of knitting this has been so enjoyable that it won't bother me as much. Oh, another tip before I forget is to like weave in your ends as you go. What I did was, as soon as I finished the perimeter, I went back and I wove in my ends. And then once I did the perimeter again, I went back and wove in my ends. And it actually wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. If I had saved them all till the very end, I do think it would have been very daunting. Just visually, it looked awful in the back until I wove in my ends. But I think with garter, like weaving in your ends in the garter stitch is not that bad. Sometimes I have yarn poking out, like here. This little tail right there. But it's also not too bad at all. So yeah, that would be my recommendation also, to weave in your ends as you go. But yeah, do you guys have any recommendations for those of you who have made a mitered square blanket like the Coziest Memory? What are some tips that you would give to those who have never made a Cozy Memories blanket before? And for those of you who have never made a Cozy Memories blanket, what questions do you have? What's keeping you? Do you want to? Yeah. I don't know, like this is just such a great project that I've enjoyed very, very much. Again, I plan to make another one, and yeah, I just wanted to dedicate a video solely for this blanket because I think it totally deserves it. So anyway, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you have all the cozy things on your needles or on your hooks, and that you are having lots of moments of peace in the midst of the chaos that is life sometimes. But until then, until I see you again next time, I hope you guys have a good one. Bye.